Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction. It's really a delight to introduce Steve Lubar today. As you heard, he's currently the director of the John Nicholas Brown Center for Public Humanities and Cultural Heritage at Brown University, where he's also a professor of history and American civilization, and also the director of the Hofenreffer Museum of Anthropology. So he wears many hats. You may not know Steve by name, but any of you who've been to the Smithsonian's Museum of American History, anytime really over the last 30 years, have encountered him. Steve joined the museum in 1982 and went on to lead a really remarkably significant career there, curating some of the most significant exhibits, permanent exhibits that museum has mounted. And you'll recognize some of them by name. 1986, Engines of Change, which I'm sure some of you recall, an exhibit concerning the American Industrial Revolution. In 1990, The Information Age. Both of those received the Dibner Award for Excellence in Museum Exhibits from the Society for the History of Technology. Most recently, in 2003, Steve curated America on the Move, which so far has been the largest and most expensive, bringing in around 30 million, I believe, exhibit that the Smithsonian's Museum of American History staged. So Steve's had a really incredible influence on how Americans understand the past through the lens of the Smithsonian. And in his spare time, he's also influenced people in the classroom. Steve's had visiting professor positions at the University of Maryland, at the University of Pennsylvania, George Washington University, at Johns Hopkins, a really remarkable career in that regard. And on top of that, he's been a prolific author and has written a handful of books, many articles, and a whole slew of book chapters on topics ranging from the history of technology to material culture, to public history, to the digital humanities, and the list goes on. In all facets of Steve's career, he's really distinguished himself with a remarkable clarity of voice. And in fact, it's this clarity of voice, this ability to explain very big and complicated problems in clear terms to a broad audience that I in part blame for my own interest in material culture studies. I encountered an essay of Steve's early on in my college career in a book that he edited himself, where he put forth the notion that technology is politics by other means. And this was really a sort of fascinating idea for me at the time, because what it suggested was that technology machines really embody cultural and political problems, and if done right, can even reconcile these problems or help us work through them. And this sort of very complicated notion about what a machine could be put so plainly really struck me powerfully at the time as a young student, and it continues to do so. And I teach material culture here today, among other things. So I appreciate the influence and have been fascinated to see how, since that publication emerged, which was in the early 90s, I think, Steve has remained on the forefront of writing about technology. And how it shapes what historians do and how we can use it to reach broader and broader publics. And technology has changed a great deal, right? And Steve has been right there in pace with those changes the whole way. In this regard, he really exemplifies, I think, what best practices in public history look like. If you're aspiring to be a public historian, his model is one to watch and to work toward. And for that reason, I'm just absolutely delighted to have him here today. And so we welcome you, Steve, to Temple. We're going to proceed in a somewhat unconventional way for this particular setting, in that what we want to do is have a conversation initially between Steve and I, and then hopefully we can involve you as we go along. So please, if you feel that we've hit a topic that you're interested in or is relevant to your work, that you join the conversation. And I see museum people here today, and students and faculty, so we have a lot of interests to go around. I think maybe a good place to start, since you're coming to us from a public humanities program, is to figure out what this means. And you know, anybody in the, I don't know about outside the university, but within the academy, in recent years, you hear this word public thrown around all over the place: public history, public anthropology, public humanities. Why do we care about public?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for that introduction. It was very, very kind. It reminded me of articles I wrote a long time ago. It's always scary. What did I say there? I remember it. Anyway, it is great to be in Philadelphia. Some of you know I'm from Philadelphia originally, especially as you see in the audience, some friends of my father's who was much involved with the Philadelphia chapter of the Society for Industrial Archaeology. So it's great to see those folks again. It's good to be back here. The question you asked about what is public humanities. One might say that we are modeling good public humanities practice by conversing rather than lecturing, that we are inviting the audience to join us. We are spreading the notion of expertise by this kind of conversation. So this is a good place to think about that question. So public humanities I describe in various ways to various audiences. When students are applying to the program in public humanities, they always ask that question, and I never answer it for them. I said, that's what you get from coming to the program, get the secret answer. When they're applying to jobs at the end of the program and they're trying to explain on their resume what it is that they've done, what is public humanities, I say, well, the great thing about a program that nobody quite understands what it means is that you can tell them exactly what you want to get the job that you're after. They say, yes, that's exactly what public humanities is. But it does seem fair to say a little bit more about the way I think about it, the way it came to be. The field that it's most closely based on, the one that is one of the publics that is most established in academia, is public history. There are lots and lots of public history programs. It is a booming field, and in fact, for those who are looking for jobs teaching history, there are many, many more jobs in public history than any place else right now. It's a field that's really taking off. And I imagined in some ways in setting up this program that is Public History Plus. And in part, that comes out of a scholarly, academic, disciplinary approach. History departments do public history. What do American civilization programs do? We thought about a public civilization, but that seems a little bit odd. Public humanities is a much broader term. It seemed to include all the areas that you mentioned. In addition to public anthropology, there's public sociology, there's public archaeology, there's public folklore. There's a whole range of programs, academic programs that work with the public in some way. And my thought was, we want to be general. We want to include all of these things and not limit it. So that's where public humanities came from, Public History Plus. It also comes from my conviction that traditional disciplinary categories are not very useful anymore, that they're breaking down. So the other big part of the program, it's sort of part public history, part public history, part museum studies, and part some other things. My sense is that those categories are not very useful anymore, that the museum will look very different in 10 years and 20 years. The way that the public thinks about history will look very different in 10 or 20 years. And that for training students, you don't want to reinforce, you don't want to solidify the old categories. You want to train students so that they're ready for the challenges of a decade or two hence when they're running things. And public humanities seems like the broadest conception of how to do that. So it's flexible. It does vary very much from students who are wanting to work in a museum to students who want to do public art to students who want to do, the buzzword in the program this year is community cultural projects, how to get communities involved with their own culture. But it's open, and I like it that way. I like the idea that it's flexible and can change.
So since you're training people to work in museums, at least some people work in museums, I assume you think museums will be with us for a while. Which feeds into a conversation that's been very hot.
Yeah, no, it's true. They will not look like they do now. I think in a couple of different ways. Internally, I think many of the traditional categories are breaking down. So there used to be in museums when I started a long time ago. There used to be curators who were sort of the subject matter experts, and they knew everything, and they sort of thought they should be running things. They knew how to. They were the professors in the museum world. There were the educators, or the audience advocates, or the audience specialists, a whole range of titles that were the people who knew about audiences. And that was, in the Smithsonian of 1980s, much less important. Nobody particularly cared about the audiences. It was about, we know stuff and we're going to teach you. There were the exhibit designers who had another set of expertise. That is all breaking down. In part, it's breaking down because of the digital revolution, which is something that is sort of changing every aspect of public work and the public humanities, so we should talk more about that. But in part, it's breaking down because museums are different kinds of places. Museums used to be about objects and knowledge, and now they're about audience. They're about that still, but they're also about audience and social spaces, just as important as the objects in some ways. So they are very different than they used to be. They will presumably be different in ways we can't quite guess 20 years from now. And my fear with some museum programs, some public history programs, is if you train people for the jobs that are there now, they're not ready to think in new ways for 20 years out. So that's an issue that I think about, worry about.